Hey guys, and welcome back for another 10 books I've read recently video. I am so sorry, I fell so off the train of doing these videos this year. I was so good for literally like 3 years solid. Every single book I've read, I have shared with you guys on this channel or on my main channel. I don't know what happened, I just fell off the train. I've been so wildly busy this year. I've been planning a wedding, I've been working so hard, like my main channel has taken so much of my time. I've got 3 cats now, 3 cats, 3 children, one of which is a kitten and he needs attention all the time. I've got a constantly sick horse. I'm making excuses. I don't know why. I'm gonna be better. Not that I think any of you even care, but adult life, it's so crazy, isn't it? Like, some people my age have children, like actual children, not cat children. How these people get anything done with their lives, I have no idea. Like, I am drowning and I don't have children. I am but a 29-year-old teenager. Anyway, besides the point, I'm going to tell you 10 books I've read recently and I'm going to give you my full spoiler-free reviews. The first book I want to talk about is one which was so wildly left field for me, and I cannot believe I enjoyed this book as much as I did, but honestly, I'm obsessed with this. Like, I finished it, 6-7 weeks ago now? I think about this all the time. It's Icebreaker by Jenny Fran Davis. This is actually a signed copy of the book that I picked up in the Strand in New York when I went there in June. Where is it? Look at that. I never buy hardbacks, but something about this, it just called to me. Like, I didn't think I'd enjoy it, but I don't know, I just had to pick it up, I had to read it, I had to see what it was about. Like, the title is so, like, enticing, isn't it? Like, it's so, like, it really pokes the bear. I had to read it and see what it was about, and honestly, I loved it. I'm not generally a fan of contemporary fiction, it's just not my kind of thing. I like soft, fluffy, cute gay romance books, or I like psychological thrillers. Like, contemporary fiction is just a bit too, like, real for me. Like, when I read, I want it to be an escape. Do you get me? I love this. The blurb here reads, an addictive, absurd and darkly hilarious debut novel about a young woman who embarks on a 10-day getaway with her partner and 2 other queer couples. And honestly, that doesn't even begin to explain what this book is about. I'm actually struggling to find the words to explain what this book is about because it is so genuinely absurd. I think this book is very much going to be a Marmite kind of situation. Like, you are either going to love this book or you are going to hate this book. And I don't know how I fell into the love category, but I really did. So our main character in this book is a woman called Sasha, and to really, like, drill home the absurdity of this book, I've just got to read you the opening sentence. It is wild. The only thing Jessie wanted for Christmas was a nude photo of Sasha as the Grinch. So Sasha was writhing in a virtual thatch of green fur generated by her iPhone, naked in an empty clawfoot bathtub, her right thumb hovering at the ready over the camera button and her back arching pornographically, her left calf draped over the edge of the tub and her right toe crooked skyward with ballistic aspiration. That is how this book opens. Sasha's a femme lesbian and her boyfriend/girlfriend Jessie is a sort of like really mask butch, to the point where Jessie suffers with a lot of gender dysphoria. It's not said in so many words that Jessie is a trans man, but Sasha often refers to Jessie as boyfriend, as he, him. It was a bit confusing going into this book, so I was reading it and I was like, it's called Icebreaker, like, it's obviously about lesbians, but Jessie's a man, until I eventually realised that he's just like really mask butch, and the pronouns kind of like flip-flop a little bit, which I thought was really interesting because even in the world of like lesbian fiction, there's really little representation for like butch lesbians. They're a really sort of passionately dysfunctional couple. Like, you can tell that this couple is not meant to be together. Like, if you knew them in real life, you would be like, that is toxic. They are not meant to be together. They are so bad for each other, and yet they are together. So they are invited over the Christmas season to go and stay at an older lesbian couple's house. And they kind of go into the stay at this house believing that they are going to have a sort of threesome or foursome situation with this older lesbian couple, Jules and Miranda. And there's a lot of like flirting between the 2 of them, but the problem with Sasha as the protagonist, the narrator of this book, is that you are in her head. You are seeing the world through Sasha's eyes, and Sasha is a fundamentally awful person. Like, she is not a good person. She is spoiled. She is like proper millennial. She is chronically online. And so you're perceiving the world and all the other characters through Sasha's lens. And Sasha's lens just sucks. Like, I think if I knew her in person, I would hate her. And I think that's the point. So Sasha's going into this stay at this couple's house believing that she is so hot, she is so sexy, like she is completely desirable, they're going to want to have sex with her. And that doesn't really materialise at any point. And I'm really unclear as to whether when she perceives this couple as flirting with her, if they're actually flirting or if she's just so self-absorbed that she thinks they are. There's also a third couple on this trip as well, Lou and Darcy. Sasha hates Darcy so much. Like, Darcy is kind of the antithesis of Sasha in every way. She's really cool, she doesn't have to try hard, everyone likes her, like she's just like one of these really naturally vibrant people, and Sasha hates her. So she is trying to convince you as the reader that Darcy is as awful as she thinks she is. But again, you just don't know because Sasha is such an unreliable narrator. So they're staying at this older couple's house. There's lots of tension between all the couples. There's like really unspoken things sort of like bubbling underneath the surface. You can tell that nobody really likes each other. Like it wouldn't necessarily be anyone's choice to be staying all together, but they do so because like that's the done thing. They're invited, they're going to go. Also throughout the entire book, Jessie is like planning something big with Sasha, that like they're planning this like televised internet streaming thing. I don't want to say what it is because that's a spoiler, the spoiler-free review. And when it eventually gets to that, like I literally read that scene with my mouth hanging open. Like you would not believe the stream. If anyone's read this book, I need to talk to somebody about this in real life because like it is so wild that I can't even begin to decipher it. My phone is vibrating. When will I learn to put my phone on silence when I'm making these videos? Apparently never. Something I absolutely adored about this book is how non-conformative it is, how it doesn't sit in society's like accepted ideals of what queerness should be. Obviously, society as a whole is straight. Like a lot of queer people really suffer with the idea of compulsory heterosexuality, feeling like you are going against the grain by being queer. And when you are living this queer life, you still got to live in society's boundaries of like what's acceptable and what's not, and this book is entirely outside of the acceptable. Fran Davis like really pushes the boundaries of what is acceptable queerness and why do we have to fit inside these boxes. Like, can't we just own our sexualities and our relationships with our genders on our own terms? Like, why do we have to abide by straight society's rules? Because we're not straight, we already live outside the boundaries of what's okay, so why not just go wild with it? Queerness in this book like really makes its own rules, and I loved it. Oh my god, on Audible I listened to the Stonewall Reader and I cannot believe it's taken me so long to listen to this book. Full disclosure, I am sponsored by Audible on my main channel, but it's just a really great sponsorship because I listen to Audible books all the time. It was one of my New Year's resolutions at the beginning of 2023 to listen to more non-fiction on Audible, and I have done that. And then Audible came to me and they asked if I wanted to work together, and I was like, hell yeah, because I love them. Full disclosure, this is not sponsored by Audible, but there's a lot of audiobooks that I've listened to on Audible in this video. Okay? Anyway, the Stonewall Reader is an anthology of essays and interviews of people who were there on the ground before, during and after Stonewall, with Stonewall being the sort of birth of the modern gay rights movement. Obviously, the gay rights movement had been building for a really long time before Stonewall, but Stonewall really was the thing that was heard around the world. This was the day, the moment which kind of kicked people into action, and it sort of started off the chain of events that has led to us being here today within so many Western countries, gay marriage now being legal, it being illegal to hate crime queer people, gay people, and yeah, it was just a really important day for the movement. Each sort of chapter in this book is a story of a different queer person who was there sort of like in the lead up to or there at Stonewall or after Stonewall. Obviously, I found the recollections of the day of Stonewall to be the most interesting. What is really fascinating is so many sort of people try and make a timeline of the day, of what happened at Stonewall. And in listening to this anthology, every single person who was there had a different perception of what happened that day, like who was the first person to really throw that brick. Because we know it wasn't Marsha P. Johnson, like she will say that herself, it wasn't her. And everyone has like different recollections of how involved Marsha was, how involved all these other people were. Some people threw out names I'd never even heard of before as being like one of the main instigators of Stonewall. Like, history, especially queer history, can never be put into these really solid boxes because at the time it happened, it wasn't being documented properly. So all these people are talking about their experiences in the years or decades after they happened. You've literally got interviews with Sylvia Rivera, you've got interviews with Marsha P. Johnson, with Ernestine, oh, what's her name? Ernestine, gonna have to Google it, wait a sec. Ernestine Eckstein, her interview was so interesting. You got interviews with people who are gay, lesbian, trans, people who consider themselves drag queens at the time. It was, it's so fascinating. The reason I do recommend the audiobook specifically of the Stonewall Reader though, is that whilst a lot of the interviews were transcribed to go in the book, in the audiobook, it's not somebody like reading transcriptions of the interviews, it's like the actual interviews themselves as they happened. It does mean the audio is a little bit dodgy at some points, like it's not always entirely clear, there's a bit of like buzzing in the background, but I think to actually listen to them as they happened is so important. And obviously because this is an anthology, you don't necessarily have to listen like in order, you can sort of go through and pick out the things that interest you the most. My personal favourites, like I said, I really enjoyed Ernestine Eckstein's interview. I really enjoyed Craig Rodwell's essay. Obviously you've got Marsha P. Johnson and Randy Wicker, you've got Sylvia Rivera. I really enjoyed Miss Major Griffin Gracie's It's a Trans Oral History Project interview from New York City, which was so good. What else? You had another Marsha P. Johnson interview, a street interview with Alan Young, rapping with a street transvestite revolutionary. Oh, it's so good. Like, this is literally history as it happened. I enjoyed it so much. Anyone who's a history nerd, you will die. It's so good. After the heaviness of those two books, on my Kindle, I next read Read Between the Lines by Rachel Lacey. I gave this a very solid 3 stars. It's a rom-com kind of book. It's the first in a series. I think there's only 2 right now. I don't know if there's going to be more after the second one. And it was very much just like fine lesbian romance book. Like it was fine. It's not necessarily the best book I've ever read, but I enjoyed it for what it was. The story in Read Between the Lines is a romance between Rosie and Jane. Rosie runs a bookstore that her mum ran before her. Her mum died many years ago, so Rosie feels like this real connection to this bookstore and those walls, and it's basically her entire life. And then one day, Rosie receives a letter from Breslin Property Management saying that the entire building is being torn down and being replaced with like high-rise flats. It's New York City, lots of property development all the time. The letter is signed by a Jane Breslin. Jane one day comes into the store, Rosie is immediately attracted to her, not knowing who she is, and a little romance starts, only there's another layer. In that, Jane and Rosie actually already know each other really well because Jane actually has an alias of Bree, and Bree is a lesbian romance author, and Jane is so ashamed of being this lesbian romance author that she never does any sort of like signing, she never makes herself public, she writes all these books under a completely secret name, doesn't tell anyone who she is. And Rosie and Bree have been talking online for years, and Rosie's always had this like little crush on Bree, and then Jane comes into the store and Rosie's got this like crush on Jane, and it becomes this whole thing. Jane/Bree obviously has no idea who Rosie is, and so one day they get brave enough to basically ask each other out on a date, and they go and meet, and only in that moment do they realise who each other are. And it's just drama from there. Honestly, do I feel like a lot of the drama in this book could have been solved by just like talking a little bit more? Like, was it all just like a little bit over exaggerated? Yeah, like Rosie holds so much contempt for Jane for her family being the ones to run the property development business, which means that her bookstore is being kicked out. Like, and I get it, that's like tough. But Rosie like really blames Jane for it. And like Jane like quite clearly hates her job, doesn't want to do it. And I just like, Rosie, it was just really unnecessarily mean, I felt, throughout a lot of this. Also, there is spice in this book. Have I read better spice in the past? Yes. Do they use some words and actions which I think are unforgivable when you're talking about lesbian sex in books? Yes. Was it fine? Yeah, it was fine. Was it fine enough that I'm reading the second in the series? Yes. Overall, am I going to say, like, run out and buy this book right now? No. But will I say it is on Kindle Unlimited, and I think if you're getting it for free with Kindle Unlimited, is it worth it? Yeah. Oh my god, this next book that I listened to again on Audible is just genuinely, I think, one of the best things I've ever listened to, ever read in my entire life, and that is Love from the Pink Palace by Jill Nalder. If you watch Channel 4's It's a Sin, I think it came out around 2020, 2021, this book, Love in the Pink Palace, is the true story that inspired It's a Sin. Russell T Davies wrote It's a Sin based on the stories of one of his closest friends, Jill Nalder. It's a Sin broke me in so many ways. Like, I don't think I have ever cried so much at a TV show than I have that. If you haven't watched it, I urge you to. It's on Netflix, it's on 4OD. It's just one of the most well-made pieces of TV that I've seen in such a long time. But basically it's a story of a group of friends living in London, a group of gay friends living in London, as the HIV/AIDS epidemic is taking over, and one by one each of these friends die. And there's a character in It's a Sin called Jill, and she is a straight woman who has all of her gay male best friends, and she finds herself having to become their caretaker when they're all getting ill. And it is just, oh, it's heart-wrenching, it's heartbreaking. And I didn't realise at the time I was watching it that it was based on a true story, but like, of course it was, of course. Jill Nalder is the Jill in question in It's a Sin. She is from a small place in Wales and she moves to London in the 1980s to pursue a career in the West End. And in doing so, she meets so many gay men who she just falls in love with. And not falls in love with in a romantic way, just like in a purely platonic best friend way. And she loves them so much, and her love for them is so evident throughout this book. And I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook over reading the actual book, just because Jill narrates it herself and you can hear and feel the emotion in her voice. Like, I choked up so many times whilst listening to this. Like, these were real people, and you feel that in every single sentence. And something else which I think just added to my enjoyment, like, I think I would have enjoyed this book if it wasn't for this layer, but like, because it had this layer, I adored it so much, is it's about theatre, it's about the West End, it's about musicals. And as somebody who is obsessed with musical theatre, I'm a huge theatre nerd. As somebody who loves London, I spend so much of my time in London, I could see it all so clearly. And if you listen to anything that I recommend you in today's video, make it this one, Love from the Pink Palace by Jill Nalder. Next up in my reading journey, I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth with my review on this one because I am going to be reviewing it in full in a video that I have coming out in the first couple of weeks of January. It may or may not be another lesbian reads straight romance books and is slightly traumatised. What I will say is I enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would do. Is it pure trash? Yes. Is it just porn, like smut? Yes, like so much so that this lesbian is now a little bit traumatised. I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't hate it. I really didn't. Our main characters here are Anastasia and Nate. Anastasia is a figure skater. Nate is a ice hockey player. Obviously, they've got tension because they're from these like rival sports and they're forced to share a rink. But the problem I have with straight romance a lot of the time is the men are so insufferable. Like, these romance authors write men which are just abusive. Like, these men are just straight up abusive, but they write them like they're supposed to be this like god, like the epitome of romance. But this book just didn't fall into that trap, and therefore I didn't hate it. Again, I'm going to talk about it more in depth in that video I've got coming up in January, but know that I did not hate this. I really didn't. Am I going to read the rest of the books in the series? Probably not, but for what it was fine. Although it could have been about 100 pages shorter. I feel like the last 100 pages were kind of unnecessary, could just ended it, but that is one of my only criticisms. Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake. Have I been counting down the days to this book being popped in my letterbox? Yes, I have. I pre-ordered this literally about 6 months ago. The day it arrived, I was so happy. We all know how much I love the Bright Falls series by Ashley Herring Blake. The first one is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. The second one is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. Third one, Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. I will say Delilah Green Doesn't Care is still my favourite, but I think that's just because I love the character of Delilah Green so much. This is a small town romance series with a group of friends, and each friend in the group is slowly finding love. As we go into the third and heartbreakingly final instalment in this series, Iris Kelly is coming off the back of some pretty bad breakups. She's bisexual. Her boyfriend of many, many years, they basically had to end their relationship because Iris didn't want marriage and kids and he did. And so Iris, on the rebound, finds herself in a relationship with a woman, and this woman, it turns out, is married. So she's been pretty badly burnt. So going into this book, Iris is like, I don't want a relationship, I don't want to date, I just want to shag around. And you know what? Love that for her. Only she tries to have a one-night stand with this girl she meets in a bar called Stevie, and things go terribly, terribly wrong. She leaves that hoping she never has to see Stevie ever again. Stevie obviously is the other main character in this book. Stevie is crippled with anxiety, like terrible, terrible anxiety. She doesn't know how to date, she doesn't know how to talk to women, and she's just like really going through it. So when this terrible stuff happens on this one-night stand or attempted one-night stand with Iris, she loses every last bit of confidence that she has. But the one place Stevie has a lot of confidence is on stage. She is a stage actress, and she basically takes part in a queer retelling of Much Ado About Nothing that's being put on by her ex-girlfriend. And basically Stevie has this like really toxic group of friends, which is really juxtaposed against Iris, and Iris is like really wonderful, supportive group of friends. And Iris just so happens to also audition for Much Ado About Nothing, and Iris and Stevie are put on stage together as love interests. Things happen, they end up having to do the whole like fake dating thing, and as always happens, actual feelings begin to form, only Iris is still convinced that she is not interested in dating anyone, even though she is quite clearly obsessed with Stevie, and the story goes on from there. I just love this series so much. Like Ashley Herring Blake, I say it every time, she has such a vivid way of writing characters that feel like they are real. They are jumping off the pages and they're in your face, in your room. Like you can see it acting out in front of you. I just really love this story. I loved how the romance developed. I love the small town romance cliche. I really enjoy it every time. The sex scenes in this, they're very steamy. Like Ashley Herring Blake writes a steamy sex scene like no other. Again, I do think the scenes in Delilah Green Doesn't Care are the best, but they're also really good in this one, and they're really good in Astra Parker Doesn't Fail as well. So I recommend this to everyone. Like if you are diving your toe in to the lesbian romance world, this series, just start here and go from there. Heading back over to Audible, I listened to Misogynation by Laura Bates. I basically had an Audible credit that I needed to use up, and I really, really enjoyed Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. That book, I think about it all the time. It blew my mind. It's terrifying and amazing, and I thought I'd give something else by Laura Bates a try. Misogynation, like, it wasn't too long. I think I was looking for at the time something that I could just sort of listen to in the background whilst I was doing my chores at my stables with my horse. Obviously, where else do horses stay? I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, I kind of just gave it 3 stars in the end. I suppose I probably should have read the synopsis better, because this is actually a collection of essays, which isn't anything like what Men Who Hate Women is like. I think my main problem with this audiobook, and it wasn't a problem with Laura Bates at all, is it just felt a little bit outdated. I had a look, this came out in 2018, most of the essays in it were dated from like 2012 to 2016, most were around 2014, so I did feel like the feminism and the statistics in it were a bit outdated. Again, not Laura Bates's issue, because at the time I probably would have enjoyed it more, but it very much felt like a introduction to feminism, like feminism for beginners, dummies 101. I think if somebody was like beginning to dip their toes in, this is probably the one I'd recommend. But for me, who was wanting to just delve in a little bit deeper and like really learn more, I didn't really feel like I learned much with this book. It was very quick to listen to, which again is exactly what I wanted, because it is a collection of essays. You could kind of just listen to one essay at a time and not feel like you were like losing the story, which I did really like. But I felt like it lacked depth and explanation. Sorry, I'm reading from my notes because I wrote notes for this one. Yeah, it just lacked a bit of like depth sometimes and explanation. Like the essay would like mention something and I'd be like, oh, okay, I can't wait to hear about that in more depth. And then it just wouldn't really go into it, which I found a bit frustrating. The essays explored everything from rape, sexual assault, workplace inequality, just like general gender inequality, sexism when it comes to like men and the patriarchy, like how men experience sexism as well. And it's all like, it all stems from the idea of patriarchy and men having certain expectations of them. It could have been a bit more intersectional, but again, this was 2018, but I suppose 2018 wasn't that long ago. Like, I think of 2018 and I'm like, oh, it's another life, but it really wasn't. Like, we were still having these conversations in 2018, so it could have done with a bit more intersectionality, I thought, but generally it did cover a wide range of subjects. Again, a good introduction to feminism, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for somebody who's wanting that real deep dive. This is another book that I'm going to talk about more in depth in my Lesbian Read Straight Romance series, but what I will say about this one is don't read it. I hated it. I'm still angry at Colleen Hoover. I was angry at her after November 9. I thought this one couldn't be anywhere near as bad as November 9, and boy was I wrong. Colleen Hoover loves an abusive male put in the place of a romantic lead, and then she loves to convince you, as the reader, this abusive, misogynistic shithead of a man is so romantic. Just literally kill me. No. And again, if you read the reviews of this on Goodreads, so many straight women are frothing at the mouth over the man in this. What's his name? Miles? Is he Miles? Miles. They are literally going mad over this man. And it makes me, it really upsets me, because this is not the standard of romance. Like, this isn't what you should expect out of a relationship. It makes me so angry. I hated it. I hated it. Hated it. No. The more I think about it, the more I hate it. It is going in the shit tip bin pile, burn it, hate it. I did have a goal this year. I don't know why I'm pointing around my lipstick, but this is the thing now. I wanted to make a video which was a recommendation of loads of different like sapphic holiday Christmas reads. And then I just didn't read enough. So maybe I'm gonna have to like read some throughout the next year and make that video next Christmas when it's still relevant. But in an attempt to do that, I read Mangoes and Mistletoe by Adriana Herrera, and I gave it a very solid 3 stars, maybe it'd be more like 2.5. This is a short story, which I feel like could have done with like 2-3 more rounds of editing, to be honest. Like, I think this is self-published, don't quote me on that, but it read like a self-published book. It wasn't the best written thing in the world, but if you want a quick, short, sapphic romance with a lot of steam, a lot of sex scenes, this will fill that. This will fill that void. Pardon the pun. Our 2 main characters in this are Sully and Quisqueya, and they are both Dominican women, and they just happen to be in Edinburgh to film a baking show, like a Christmas special baking reality show. I really love the sort of juxtaposition between them being like Dominican women and being in Edinburgh, and I feel like the author did really capture Edinburgh really well. I love that city so much, and she really captured like Edinburgh at Christmas time. Quisqueya and Sully meet in this show, and it's quite clear there's this like expectation of them to be this like formidable Dominican pair who are gonna like put all these like Dominican Caribbean flavours in their cakes, in their baking. And it turns out that Sully, well, she is a 2nd-generation immigrant in the USA who really, really loves her culture and her heritage. Quisqueya's more recently come from the Dominican Republic, and she has more problems with her culture and accepting that, and she kind of just wants to like fit in and not be put into this like stereotypical box. And so they really come to heads over that, because they are, did I say they're paired up? They're paired up in this baking show, and so they're like fighting constantly and bickering over like Sully's being like, why don't you accept your heritage and be proud of who you are, and Quisqueya's got like all these issues with the Dominican Republic and who she feels like she should be. But of course there's this other layer on top of that, in that they are wildly attracted to each other. Quisqueya's really trying not to be attracted to Sully, but she undeniably is. One thing I will say, because this is a short story, the story progresses really, really fast. There's no like slow burn or even like any burn really between them like not liking each other and then just like shagging. It just kind of like happens really abruptly, which in the sense of a short story it makes sense, but I feel like it could have been built up a little bit more. Overall, it was really cute. Would I recommend it? Probably not to everyone, but if you want like a quick read, like a quick Christmas read with some spice, it was cute, and I enjoyed like the baking aspect, and it very much felt like you're reading a story based on the Great British Bake Off, which I'm sure was the inspiration. And the final book I want to talk about is Cleat Cute by Meryl Wilsner. I love this so much. I gave this 4.5 stars. A lesbian football romance. Like, truly, is there anything better in this world? I've really, really got into football in the past like 1.5 years, ever since the Euros, and I discovered my deep, deep, deep burning love and passion for Leah Williamson and Lucy Bronze. If you're watching this, call me. I adore this book so much. Obviously, I'm still like a beginner football lover. I don't care about men's football. Do not talk to me about men's football. Don't know, don't care. Women's football, I'm obsessed. So I'm still like learning a lot about the world and learning a lot about the sport. And I felt like this wasn't too much. Like, I was a bit worried going into it that it was going to be a bit like football heavy and it's going to use a lot of terminology that I didn't really get. I didn't really feel that at all. If you have no interest in football, I don't know if you might struggle with this a little bit. But overall, I loved it. Our main characters in this book are Grace Henderson and Phoebe Matthews. Grace is very much like grumpy, Phoebe is sunshine, and it's very much like the grumpy sunshine trope, and they really bounce off each other, and I just love it. It falls into the spice, the romance really, really quickly in this book, which I always do enjoy about Merrill Wilsner stuff. There's no fucking around. They fucking. What starts out as a very friends with benefits situation very slowly burns into this romance. I really love how there's not a burn into like the sex, like the sex is there from the beginning, the burn is into like the feelings, which is really cute. Something I love about this book so much is how much Grace and Phoebe as a couple, as individuals, remind me of me and my fiance. Phoebe is literally Holly, my fiance, in written form. Like, she is so ADHD, so like talks all the time, so confident. I think I actually said in my last video in which I quickly reviewed this book that Phoebe was really annoying because I was only a little bit of the way through the book and I hadn't like really got into it yet. But as I got further into the book, I was literally like, oh, it's like severe ADHD, and that is Holly. I really, really loved her as a character. The other character, Grace, so the chapter's like split between the points of views of both these characters. The other character is Grace, and in my head I was picturing Grace as Lucy Bronze, which I really, really enjoyed. And as I was reading this book, I literally about 4 or 5 times I was like reading out sentences aloud to Holly, and I was being like, isn't this so me? Like, I literally feel like I'm reading me in a book. Like, did Merrill Wilsner like have a camera on me, and was she writing about me like specifically in this book? And then it got to the end and it's like heavily hinted that Grace is autistic. And it's like, it's made me have questions about things. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I think I'm just gonna like repress that a little bit. I'm gonna put that down into like a little box, and I'm going to not think about that, because that's an interesting development potentially in my life. But Grace, I related with her on so many levels. Like, I just got her. I wish I'd like tagged certain sentences and things that Grace did that was literally like, yeah, I get you. Like, I understand you. It was, yeah, repress. I also really liked in this book, as the romance progresses, you really see the compromises that Grace and Phoebe make to have each other in their lives, the compromises they make to make each other's life like a little bit easier. And again, I really related to that, with me being Grace apparently and Holly being Phoebe. Like, a lot of the compromises they make are compromises that we've had to make in our relationship for each other, like little changes we had to make each other's lives easier. And I really loved how that was touched on all throughout this book. Sorry, just reading my notes. I loved how this delves into the thing about being like out/not out in the public eye. Grace is one of the like biggest soccer players, football players in the USA, so she's like quite famous, and she is in the closet, not in her personal life, but like to the public. She's never spoken about her sexuality, and it really goes through her like mind process of like why she is reluctant to come out and why she doesn't want to share that part of her life with others. Whereas Phoebe is like so out and proud. She talks about being a lesbian all the time. And it's really interesting to sort of see that mindset, because you see that a lot in real women's football as well. Like 90% of women footballers are lesbian, but so many of them aren't out. But yeah, did I just really enjoy this book because I enjoy women's football, because I felt some sort of personal connection to it? Maybe. But overall, it's just a great book. I love the slow burn romance, not the slow burn sex, the slow burn like romance, the slow burn feelings. I love their realisation that they had the feelings for each other. I enjoyed this so much. And also the cover's so pretty. Look at that, it's such pretty colours. So there you go, there are 10 books I read recently and all my reviews. I am going to try and film a couple more videos before the end of the year, and in the new year I want to do my roundup of every single book that I read in 2023. I want to give you my quick reviews, I want to rank them, I want to talk to you about loads of books that I'm excited to see come out in 2024. We've got a lot of content coming up for the end of the year. Also, I kind of have a goal of hitting 5,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you fancy helping me out with that, and if you're not subscribed, click that subscribe button. Those words came out really wrong then, but I'm not going to refilm that. That'd be really helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.